Baldur's Gate 3 was a monumental achievement in gaming. Not only was it ridiculous that a game could be this deep in terms of unique player experiences and the sheer number of ways you could interact with the world and the story being told within it, but it was also a ridiculous achievement for an indie game, and yes, this is an indie game, to hit this kind of mainstream success and garner this kind of attention. Baldur's Gate 3 was such a runaway hit that you had AAA developers talking about how they were actually worried that it was going to raise player expectations for future games, because God forbid players want to buy something that's actually worth their money. Whether you enjoyed Baldur's Gate 3 or not, and it's totally okay, by the way, for this kind of game just to not be for you. I'm not one of those people that's going to be like, oh, you have to enjoy every second of this game or you're dumb and you're made of eggs. Like, I totally recognize that despite how much of an achievement Baldur's Gate 3 is, that doesn't mean it's for everyone. And that's totally okay, because no game should be for everyone. That's how creativity dies. But we should all be on the same page about what this game accomplished and why it's so special. If you want a really good video about why Baldur's Gate 3 was praised the way it was, I recommend this video by Bisley. I think he puts it into words better than I can. But also, I want to get into the main event of this video, because if you've been following me for a while now, you know that I previously did a bit of documenting, if you want to call it that, of all the people who were furious at Baldur's Gate 3 winning a bunch of awards at the end of 2023, be it because they thought turn-based games were inherently bad, or maybe they were just a bunch of Sony fanboys who were upset that Spider-Man 2 didn't win anything. But like, I thought the saga with Baldur's Gate 3 Salt ended a while back, but good golly, I was incorrect. So the other day, Baldur's Gate 3 took home Game of the Year at the BAFTAs, making it the first game in history to win Game of the Year at all 5 major industry award shows. And just so we're all on the same page here, the 5 game show Infinity Stones are the Game Awards, the Golden Joysticks, the Game Developer Choice Awards, the DICE Awards, and the BAFTAs. Baldur's Gate 3 is the first game ever to get the top prize at every single one of those shows, and they now have the power to snap all of AAA gaming out of existence. Just kidding, I wish.
Were it so easy.
But Kotaku's reporting on this made its way onto my Twitter For You page, and just out of curiosity, I looked at the responses, and who would have guessed it, people are still upset about this game winning awards. So come along with me as we look at a bunch of people who are still in absolute denial that Baldur's Gate 3 is a game deserving of praise for one reason or another. Strap in, because this one gets really stupid. Kashi responds to Kotaku's news and says, I still don't get how this boring game is rated so highly. It's so generic in every way, and nothing about it is worth noting. Like, it's insane. Of all the things to call Baldur's Gate 3, generic should not be in the running. Like, that should be nowhere close to the word bank. Do you know what generic means? You think Baldur's Gate 3 blew up because it's just so similar to everything else? You think its characters became popular because they just had nothing unique about them? You think the combat and interactivity and moment-to-moment gameplay connected with so many people because it was just doing things that we'd seen a million times before? Like, I'm honestly willing to look past what you say here about the game being boring, because it's like I said at the beginning of the video, I can absolutely forgive you if this game's not really your jam. I was not really much for turn-based games like this before either, so I get it. But to say it's generic is mind-blowing to me. There's literally nothing generic about it. That's why it was successful. Zahiro says, only if they didn't make this game with bird perspective, it could have been the best game. Oop, found the PS5 player. The cinematic third-person action game player, the I need to see every single sweat pour on every single character model or else the game sucks somehow player. Like, I'm just saying, if you seriously think the camera position in Baldur's Gate 3 is a mark against it, that's your own problem. If you just can't enjoy games with a bird perspective, you might want to broaden your horizons a bit with the games you play. You might be missing out on some really good ones. Zafty says, because they paid for it to be rigged, lol. I love this argument. People have been doing this one for so long, and it never gets any less stupid. Baldur's Gate 3 was developed and published by Larian Studios. It's an indie game. If you seriously think Larian Studios has the power to rig major game awards like this, you need to stop putting your head in the microwave. Baldur's Gate 3 was up against games published by Capcom and Nintendo and Sony. If you seriously think Larian Studios has the ability to rig award ceremonies over those other studios, you are coping harder than anyone has ever coped before in the history of coping. That just didn't happen. Also, if you really want to get sniffy about this, if you actually think Larian Studios rigged all these award shows, then what you're saying is that these award shows are not actually worth anything because they're capable of being bought off by an indie studio, which means no one should ever take these award shows seriously, which means if these awards had gone to a game that you wanted to win, you shouldn't have cared because it's not actually a prestigious award. It's a riggable award. But I have a gut feeling that if your game had won Game of the Year, you wouldn't actually feel this way about the show's integrity. Call that a bit of speculation on my part, but I just kinda have a hunch about that one. PK says, you mean first game with no gameplay? It was just a gay trans bear sex simulator. Well, according to How Long to Beat, the average run of Baldur's Gate 3 is around 109 hours. So today I learned that all of that is invalidated because some people chose the specific actions and dialogues that led to them getting to fuck a bear. And because you're allowed to fuck a bear in this game, that means there's no gameplay anywhere. Meaning the 100 plus hour experience is actually just 100 plus hours of you fucking gay bears, according to you. And you know what?
I'll take your entire stock!
J Pool says it didn't win Polygon, IGN, or Giant Bomb Game of the Year. Yes, because no one gives a shit what they think. And they shouldn't. We shouldn't care about any of these, but this is just like basic reading comprehension and like situational awareness. They literally say in the article you're responding to that they're talking about the 5 big game shows, not 5 big outlets, 5 big game award ceremonies. It's like if a movie won the best Oscar and the best like Golden Globes, but then you came out and you were like, yeah, but Jake didn't like it. Like, who gives a shit about what Jake thinks? That's not what we were talking about. Like, we shouldn't be taking any of these shows seriously. Like, they're all just journalist circle jerks anyways. But like, if you're putting the genius minds of IGN and Polygon, if that's like, if you're like dismissing game award ceremonies, but then putting stock behind the opinions of IGN and Polygon, like, you must be very new here. Hello, I'm interrupting this video to remind you that this channel is sponsored by 4D Gaming. If you would like a really nice mousepad, go to 4dgaming.com and use code Joe for a discount. This channel is also sponsored by Glitch Energy. It's basically G Fuel, but better, so go to Glitch Energy and use code Joe for a discount. Thank you for letting me interrupt your content. I'll let you keep watching it now. Target Master says the porn game whose most popular character was a conventionally attractive woman that gamers TM could dress in skimpy lingerie. Makes you wonder why it became popular. I genuinely don't know who you're talking about. You said the game's most popular character was a conventionally attractive woman. Are you talking Shadowheart? Like, I guess it's subjective, but I was always under the impression that Shadowheart was not the most popular character in this whole game. I mean, if we're talking objectively, I think the most popular character would be this handsome lad. But also, this handsome lad is a lad, and you seem upset about a laddess in this post. So unless I grossly misunderstand something, I genuinely don't know who you're talking about here. But also, all that aside, if you're upset that this game lets you make the women naked, I feel I should tell you that you can make the men naked as well. And if you think the presence of naked people makes this a porn game, I really don't know what to tell you. Other than be sure to never go into an art museum because apparently the presence of naked people means it's no longer art, it's porn. Also, fun fact, if you don't want to see your party members naked in Baldur's Gate 3, don't do that. Problem solved. This just seems like a really weird thing to harp on. Gav says acting like Alan Wake 2 didn't take home IGN's choice SMH. Yeah, again, the article literally isn't about that. It's not about that. If you clicked on the article that you're responding to, you would know that. I never thought I'd be coming up to Kotaku's defense. Like, Jesus. And also, again, if you think IGN's opinion on Game of the Year should hold equal weight to, like, the Golden Joysticks or the DICE Awards, that's just kind of a yikes. I don't think IGN needs any more ego stroking than it already gets from the rest of this stupid industry. It's like I said, none of these outlets and none of these award shows should actually be taken seriously the way they once would be, because just we all know that the people calling the shots at the outlets and at the award shows are not good representations of gamers. We're all on the same page about that none of these opinions should be held as gospel. But that being said, if you're going to put stock into any outlet or any award show's opinion, why would it be IGN? Why is that the one you're going to bat for? Ooh-wee! Zero Elite says game about sex gets tons of awards. Wow, didn't see that one happening. Yeah, apparently this game is just about sex. Baldur's Gate 3 is all about sex. Like when did gaming discussion go back to 2008? Like, remember that infamous Fox News report, like the big sex box report, and they said Mass Effect was basically just a sex simulator, and they even brought on tiny Jeff Keighley to defend it on the air? Yeah, that was 2008, 16 years ago. And apparently we're still doing this. Ooh, the game has sex in it, therefore that's a sex game. That's all it means. Be sure to shield the public from all the moral degeneracy happening with this sex, but also the brutal violence and torture. That's fine. That's fine. It's the sex in my M-rated video game that's the problem. Like, I just find this double standard to be interesting. Graphic violence, murder, gore, drugs, alcohol abuse, those are all fine. Those are fine. But sex and nudity, none of that in my M-rated game. Get off my Christian Minecraft server. Larney says, never heard of this game. But like, how? Tony quote tweets and says, industry plant of a series, gameplay looks boring as fuck too. Industry plant. You think Baldur's Gate 3 is an industry plant, as in something that succeeded because the industry made it so, as opposed to it actually proving its worth to the consumer. You think Baldur's Gate 3 was an industry plant. The indie game that was in development for like 5 years and in early access for close to 3. Genuinely, how the fuck could Baldur's Gate 3 possibly be an industry plant? Who in the industry would benefit from that? Like, who in the industry capable of creating an industry plant game like this? Who in that demographic would benefit from Baldur's Gate 3 being successful? Who in the gaming industry would benefit from secretly funding and creating and propping up a game like Baldur's Gate 3 that has actively raised the standards for games industry-wide and forced AAA games to be judged harder than they were before? In what universe would the industry benefit from creating Baldur's Gate 3 and propping it up? Like, aside from the fact that this is just self-evidently not what happened with Baldur's Gate 3, I genuinely want to know how you could possibly think a game like this is an industry plant. It literally is not. It is an indie game that organically grew over a multi-year period and then eventually exploded into the mainstream because the 1.0 version was really, really, really good. Baldur's Gate 3 was like as organic as you can possibly get nowadays. Okay, yeah, that one was rough. I know I've said this in previous Baldur's Gate 3 related videos, but it actually depresses me that AAA gaming has damaged game criticism this much. Like, the only reason people are bringing up the whole bird's eye thing, or, outdated thing, is because you've been force-fed QuickTime events and cinematic camera angles for the last decade, and now you think it's the only way to have a good time. And honestly, it's just sad. Because there is so much that can be done with the mechanics of games that many would just instinctively see as outdated. And the obsession with realistic graphics and cinematic presentation is the death of originality in art style and experimental gameplay. Baldur's Gate 3 definitively proved that you don't need to do things by the books in order to achieve praise, and I cannot wait to see how the AAA industry responds to this over the next few years. Realistically, it'll probably just be with even more cinematic third-person action games that fail to make $1.5 billion, and then the publishers will blame gamers for one reason or another, while the indie and AA markets continue to clean up the mess. Which, honestly, that sounds like a pretty good future to me. Okay, cool. I'll see you guys there. Toodles.